Welcome back to another episode of ROC Boys Football. Day 1 and 2 of workouts for the 2023 Combine are in the book. We're going to jump on and just talk about some winners, some losers from each position. And again, this is if you guys are a fan of the channel, you know we are not massive Combine guys. We kind of just use it just to verify some of the stuff, maybe check some boxes. Like, for example, Sauce Gardner running the 40 time he did last year when he had some concerns for the long speed. That was something we took into account. But again, just talking about some winners and losers. Before we get into it, I just want to say thank you to you guys again. The support you guys have shown through the draft process truly has been amazing. We really do appreciate it. So if you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We do appreciate all the support you guys have shown. Without further ado, Dill, kick us off. Let's start with this edge group, this pass rusher group. Who was kind of popping out some of your winners from the day here?
I mean, the obvious one right here is Nolan Smith, just because I think what we all saw was a guy who was really solid on the film, did everything well. Maybe he wasn't great at anything, but really solid player. And then he comes to the combine and he looks like almost by far the best athlete in this edge class, which I think, given that he was so sound on the tape, makes you think he might have worked himself into the first round.
I think he is a first round. I mean, I had him as a top 32 guy on my board. I was a massive fan of Nolan Smith, and obviously the pec injury hurt, but I mean, he showed everybody what he's about. And I mean, people forget, 4 years ago, him and Kayvon Thibodeau were the two top players out of high school in the class. And you don't get that number one overall ranking out of high school if you are not a high-end athlete. You couple that with, I don't know what they're doing in Athens, Georgia, but they're just pumping out guys who are putting just jaw-dropping numbers during the combine. And Nolan Smith, just another guy to add to that list. A 4.39 in the 40, which is incredible. But you take a look at some of those explosive metrics that, like, this matters for edge rushers. How quick can you get off the ball? Jumps out of the gym at 41.5 inches. And at broad, I believe he was a top 3 guy with the broad jump as well. Nolan Smith was one of the major winners of the combine. And again, when you take a look at, as this waits to load here, yep, top 3, 10-8. That is a massive number for an edge rusher. And when you look at, like, guys who are going to interview extremely well at the combine, Nolan Smith's going to be the top of that. This is
saw all his teammates on Twitter like going nuts when he ran his time. And again, we've talked about it. In a group of absolute alpha dogs of what that Georgia defense is, you kind of got the sense that he was very much
he was the leader
in that room. As when he talked, you listened, kind of thing.
He was like the captain of that defense, and you said it best. All the first-round talent and all the NFL talent that Georgia defense has put into the league, like, Nolan Smith was the guy rallying the troops. Next winner, it has to be Tommy Adebawore from Northwestern. He is increasingly, and this is a guy that doesn't necessarily flash on the film, but he gets down to the Senior Bowl. He dominates. Was a hard player to stand out in that Northwestern defense, but man, 6'2", 280 pounds. 34-inch arms, so he plays with good leverage. He has the length, and then he's extremely explosive. A 4.49 in the 40 for a guy who is 280 pounds is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. When I went back and watched him and play some teams like Ohio State, again, he wasn't necessarily asked to be that guy on the edge. I'm not sure that's what he's going to do in the NFL either, but in terms of a guy you can move pretty much across the D-line and just be a problem for guys, because he's really athletic for guys on the inside. He's really powerful, I thought, and plays really powerful, plays with obviously great leverage. And he's got those long arms, even though he's a shorter guy. So he's a guy who, again, if the height doesn't really matter if the arms are really good. So he's a guy I think we kind of knew he was a good athlete. I don't think we would have thought maybe the best or one of the better athletes in the whole class, but he's a guy who I think is helping himself and will continue to help himself through the draft process, just because he was playing a little in what you mentioned,
hard,
that wasn't ever going to put up big monster numbers for himself.
And I would give it on, I'm not going to talk too much about him, but Dylan Horton was kind of seen as a guy, and I've been banging the table for him because the film is good. He's a high motor player, like a day 3 selection. He tested him he was much more impressive testing than I would have thought he was going to be. I thought, the reason he's a day 3 pick is because he doesn't really have that high end athleticism. Tested kind of middle of the pack, which is good for him. One of the losers I thought of the combine here, Lucas Van Ness. All the interviews I heard leading up to the combine, and this is a guy that me and you aren't necessarily the highest on out of the draft community, was this dude is going to jump out of the gym. He's dummy explosive. 31-inch vertical, that's towards the end of this edge rusher class. He didn't necessarily pop in the broad jump or 40 either. He was a guy that I think left a little bit on the bone in terms of athletic testing and showing what he's got.
Yeah, and especially because a lot of his is projection, because, again, he didn't play a ton in college. He wasn't wildly productive. Now, I think at the end of the day, he's still a guy when you watched him.
Yes.
You saw something there. Like, he just looked hard to block at times. He looked
power. That power is going to translate.
Yeah, exactly. The football power still seems like it's right, but it does probably give you some cause to pause. Like, well, why are we testing, or why is he testing towards the bottom of the pack? Because that, again, we're basing a lot of our evaluations of a guy like him on, well, what can he be? So
yeah, and then the last two guys you might want to highlight, Mike Morris, who is a guy that we not as high. As Michigan fans, I'm a huge Mike Morris fan, but as a prospect, I wasn't with the top 100, top 75 projections that you were seeing. You obviously saw the viral clips of him just like stumbling over himself in the bags. Didn't really test like a great athlete. Kind of a tweener anyway. So some question marks about Mike Morris, but again, there were some big time winners when it comes to showing their athleticism off the edge. Byron Young, another guy that we knew was going to test well and just kind of verified it. They'll switching over to the linebacker group. I want to talk about your guy, Jack Campbell, who, let's start with this 40-yard dash. He didn't have eye-popping numbers, and you knew he wasn't going to have eye-popping numbers, but a 4.65, it kind of checks the box of he's not going to be a guy stuck in the mud when you ask him to go sideline to sideline and cover those tight ends up the seam.
I mean, that was the thing. I don't know why everyone was saying he was going to be such a liability running in the 40, and it's obviously not a great time by any stretch of the imagination, but it definitely wasn't one of those. It's not going to make you worried, and because the tape was so good, I just throw it out. It's like, who cares? Like, okay, he showed he's not going to do like a Paul Walker from TCU from years ago when he ran a 5-second and the tape looked really good, and then he ran an eye-poppingly slow time and obviously really didn't amount to much in the NFL. But for Jack Campbell, this isn't a time that like guys fail at. This doesn't feel like one of those, well, nobody's ever done anything at a 4.65.
And he's obviously one of the bigger, more powerful linebackers. And when you get to the vertical and broads of the linebackers, kind of testing that explosiveness, Jack Campbell at the top of the list here, 37.5-inch vertical, and then broad. I believe he was a top 5 performer in that category as well. Second, I'm 10.8. That's an incredible broad jump. Jack Campbell checked the box for me, and I think for a lot of other scouts, in the sense that I'm not necessarily too worried about his speed, because if it was like 4.8, then you're starting to question, like, is he the athlete that can transition from that Big Ten West to the NFL? I think Jack Campbell answered some of those questions. Still another winner that we knew was going to pop in the combine, Owen Popo from Auburn. Absolute blazing 40.
And I'm hoping that gets some conversation about him, because even when I'm watching the tape, I think he is much closer to that top 5 linebacker spot in a class that, again, I don't think is particularly strong. So I don't get why he's not being talked about a little more close with like guys like Trenton Simpson, because you watch both. Like I think Owen Popo's tape, frankly, was a little better, and now he's showing he is at least the athlete, if not a little ahead of where Trenton Simpson is. So you've got two guys who, again, I don't think killed it in college. Like Jack Campbell is on nails in college tape. But you got two guys who I think maybe the tape you could argue is kind of equal. And Owen Popo obviously showing he can really move.
Yeah, he's a little bit of an undersized guy, where Trenton Simpson a little bit more of that linebacker body that you want.
He's just a little short.
Yeah, but that's big. He is rocked up. Yeah, he is absolutely. And I believe I want to check the bench I'm not necessarily caring too much about, but I believe he put 29 like that.
He got like a little shorter arms.
I don't care. He's got that 32-inch arms almost. Like, he's got some length to him as well. He was definitely one of the winners. Trent Simpson, more of a box check. You knew he was an athlete, and I think he answered those questions. Now, getting to the cornerbacks, that is probably the position, that and edge, probably the positions that you care most about the testing, because when you're covering elite athletes at wide receiver, you got to be an athlete yourself. Taking a look at this cornerback position, Dill, there were a couple guys that flashed, and obviously you got to talk about our guy DJ Turner running the blazing 46.
And I think Michigan had been saying he was going to run a really good time. Obviously, the haters would say Jim Harbaugh is going to lie about it and hype his guys up. Obviously, he wasn't just blowing smoke. DJ Turner flies.
Yeah, I think you knew he was fast. I think he's still probably a day 3 guy with how good this cornerback group is. The Maryland kids, Ja'Cory Bennett and Deonte Banks. Deonte Banks
that's
was very
a huge
impressive.
one. I actually think that's a big one because Deonte Banks, to me, a little bit of a bigger corner. I thought maybe not quite as fluid and sticky as maybe you'd want to see, but that's putting a good time out. And again, and you look at a similar guy like Ringo, who wasn't a nails and man coverage, but these guys can move. And in a scheme, if you can really fly, I think, and be those size, I think you can help yourself a lot.
Emmanuel Forbes is an interesting. He ran much faster. I had some questions about the long speed. I don't have questions about the long speed anymore. The one question I do have, 166 pounds at 6'1.5" is that concerning too? Like, that is really, really small.
I think
166.
We can. I would think if you're that long, you can jam. And again, I think the wideouts are getting a little smaller in the NFL. There's not that many jumbos anymore who are playing like Calvin Johnson, using physicality to win. So I think, given how good he was in college against big time wideouts, the weight doesn't concern me. It never really does for corners. They're not paid to be in the box banging it out. But with that length, I think he should be fine at that weight.
And then the other guy you want to mention, Joey Porter Jr. I think this was a box check. It wasn't a concerning 40. He's obviously not a Blazer. I don't think many people expected him to be a Blazer. 4.46. It's not the top of the group, but it's also not a time that, as you're a scout, like, you're concerned about the long speed as he transitions to the NFL.
Know who you're looking at. I think that's a nice time for Tyreek Stevens.
Yes, very much so.
Big physical corner who I think, again, we mentioned in our whenever we're talking about him. I know we have been a little bit, but he's a guy who you saw him winning physically. He would just jam guys. He would make it really hard to get off the line on him. I think now he's proving he might be able to be a little more versatile than just a heavy press man corner. You can probably stick him in zone and let him run around. And again, now that NFL teams kind of mix their schemes a little more consistently, I think him running that good of a time is a helpful.
Are you concerned at all about Brian Branch with the 4.6? Because I'm not necessarily concerned. He is a guy that thrives kind of in the box as a tackler. I was a little slower than I thought, but nothing to cry about here.
I'm not sure I'd say concerned, just because he's a guy who I think was so good on tape. But it's not a good time. That's very much bordering on the line of concerning for especially what he's going to do, which is be versatile, be able to cover in the slot, play a little bit of free safety. I think
that's where I'm concerned at. The free safety, like, does he have that range to deal with that much space?
It makes you concerned because you didn't really see that in college, frankly. He didn't.
No.
The way Alabama played, they didn't have him dropping deep and having to be rangy. And I'm not sure he's a good enough corner to not have the versatility to drop back and play deep man's or deep, like, zone safety, if you will.
Last guy I want to highlight, he's been a guy that I've been talking about a lot throughout the process. Julius Brents, extremely explosive, was top 3, and I believe both the vertical and the broad jump, 41.5 inch. That's a big time jump. The 40 was a little bit slower than I thought, but you don't teach, you can't really teach the length that he has at 34-inch arms, 6'2.5". Check the box with the 40-yard dash. He's going to be a guy that I think is slowly working himself up into a top 100 prospect, and sounds like he's probably going day 2 at this point.
Yeah, not a guy who I think had concerns athletically on the field. So it's even though the 40 wasn't great, it didn't seem like it like slowed him down against certain guys who you maybe would have thought would have challenged him in that regard then.
All right, let's take the last group we're looking at, interior defensive linemen. Looking at the 10-yard split more, just because I think that's what a lot of the scouts care a little bit more about. a guy that I was saying is probably going to help himself out a little bit, Brian Brazy. Now, the measurements weren't great. At 6'5.5", only 32-inch arms, not necessarily great, not necessarily what you're looking for. But again, reminding people of why he was another former number one prospect out of high school, because that size and that speed is hard to teach. And Brian Brazy kind of showed that at the combine here.
I mean, because you look at the guys who are in this group, they're a little smaller than him, just to be realistic. They're not running at that 300-pound size. So he obviously, and that's a good time. I don't think anyone should be wildly surprised. So you watch him on no, he's a freak.
He gets off the ball extremely well. In a 4.67 by Kalijah Kancey in the actual 40, that is, he was moving, and you kind of expected it. Came in a little taller than people thought, 6'1", 280 pounds. We still have questions about him working his way to does he have that power to transition to the next level? But again, very, very good testing. Just a bench press to highlight our boy Mazi Smith. Two guys I kind of want to highlight here. One, Mazi Smith didn't test. I think he's waiting to do it at his pro day. From what we've all heard, very explosive dude at 330 pounds. The guy I want to highlight, Moro Ajomo. He's undersized. I get that. But he is so powerful. He's so explosive. He showed it on the bench. He showed it on the vertical and the broad jump. You have question marks about him holding up on the inside. I think he answered that at the combine, and then the tape for sure answers it. He is a certified stud.
Yeah, I think Moro Ajomo, I mean, we talk a lot about Keandre Coburn, but I think in this day and age, Moro Ajomo gives you a lot of flexibility because he's going to move sideline. I mean, he just moves at a different level. And again, I don't think I get there's an element of being undersized, but I didn't notice it. When you told me at first, like what his measurements were, I was like, oh, he looks like a 310-pound guy.
That's because he just carries it. I mean, like he's rocked up.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Any other players you wanted to give a shout out before we wind down here?
No, I mean, I think we got to the guys I wanted to talk about.
A couple of guys we didn't see test that we'll probably see during pro day. Miles Murphy, a little bit disappointed just because I want to finally get him back in as a top 10 prospect. Like he's going to test well when he does test because, again, people forget how good of an athlete he is. And you see his measurements. Longer arms than Tyree Wilson. And all the talk is Tyree Wilson's crazy length. Guess what? Miles Murphy, longer arms. I think he's going to test, if not just as good as Tyree Wilson. And I'm excited to kind of put to rest this. Miles Murphy doesn't have the ceiling that Tyree Wilson does because he certainly does. Again, appreciate you guys for checking in. That is no hate on Tyree Wilson. I'm tired of my Miles Murphy.
Miles Murphy stands.
Yeah, you got to put some respect on the dude's name. Again, appreciate you guys for checking us out. If you do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.